Now, let me to discuss about the zona glomerulosa. Zona glomerulosa is very thin layer that is responsible for production of aldosterone. As I told you, it has some extra enzyme that convert the corticosterone as a family of cortisol into aldosterone, and then aldosterone will affect the kidney and help the process of the blood volume regulation and those functions that I will tell you. Again, for the aldosterone should be transported in the blood. Therefore, we have albumin and corticosteroid binding protein, the same protein that we are responsible for cortisol. Here also will work to transport the protein, to transport the cortisol inside the, aldosterone inside the blood. Aldosterone has about a half-life of about 20 minutes, because it can affect the blood pressure, increase the blood pressure. Therefore, it should be immediately removed from the body. And in the kidney, mainly in the kidney, in the liver, it is inactivated and excreted. This figure show the aldosterone releasing area, zona glomerulosa, and the zona fasciculata that I told you about, and it was releasing cortisol. We have another layer that is named reticularis, that I will talk about it. As I told you, the mechanism of aldosterone function is similar to the cortisol. Aldosterone will bind to its receptor, cytoplasmic receptor inside the cell, and this complex will move on into the nucleus, and then in the nucleus will stimulate several factors involved in the regulation of urine formation, uptake of glucose and sodium, and therefore it has mineralocorticoid effects. And this figure again show the process that I told you about cortisol, that prevent the cortisol to exert any aldosterone effect, because we have this enzyme, and then convert the cortisol into cortisone. The cortisone will come back into the blood, and by other cells, cortisone will be converted into cortisol, the process of the shuttle that I told you. When we want to discuss about the aldosterone function, we should remember this is a part of kidney physiology, but then I am not going to discuss in more detail. But for absorption of water and sodium, we have some proteins such as channels, epithelial sodium channel, and this epithelial sodium channel allow the sodium to be uptake from the lumen into the cell, and then on the other hand, on the other side, the sodium potassium ATPase pump will work to send the sodium into the interstitial space and then blood. In this process, as you can see, we have two proteins, one sodium potassium ATPase pump and another is epithelial sodium channel. Aldosterone stimulate these protein expression, therefore facilitate the sodium absorption. When we facilitate the sodium absorption, then we will facilitate the water uptake, and this process will reduce the volume of the urine and increase the volume of blood. On the other hand, aldosterone also increases potassium excretion into the urine. This is done by the stimulation of potassium channels that allow the leak of potassium into the urine. Also, aldosterone has some effect on hydrogen concentration. In fact, by stimulating hydrogen pumps, aldosterone stimulates hydrogen loss in the urine, and by this way it prevents body from acidosis. This again is by the stimulation of the hydrogen pumps. In fact, if I want to summarize the effect of aldosterone, I can say that aldosterone is stimulated when blood volume is decreased. When blood volume is decreasing, then the renin-angiotensin system will be stimulated, and this will stimulate the aldosterone. Aldosterone tries to increase the sodium retention. increase blood volume, and this process will negatively inhibit the aldosterone secretion. On the other hand, aldosterone also decrease the plasma potassium, and therefore if the stimulant for aldosterone come from potassium, this also will be removed, because we know that high potassium in the level in the blood will stimulate the aldosterone secretion. And this show how the aldosterone affect the process of sodium uptake, as I told you, epithelial sodium channel and sodium potassium ATPase pump. And for this reason, that aldosterone is able to increase the blood pressure. Sometimes there are some drugs that affect the aldosterone effect, such as spironolactone, that prevent high blood pressure. How? By blocking the aldosterone function. Or drugs that, such as amiloride, that are diuretic drugs, inhibit sodium, epithelial sodium channel, therefore prevent sodium reabsorption against the aldosterone. This is showing the aldosterone function in the renal system and circulation, reabsorption of sodium and secretion of potassium, enabling hydrogen secretion also, and causing alkalosis in the body. And on the other hand, about the aldosterone, one point that I should tell you is the aldosterone escape. What is aldosterone escape? I told you that aldosterone is able to increase blood volume, therefore increasing blood pressure. But if we inject one animal with high dose of aldosterone for a long time, the blood pressure do not increase constantly. One point will reach that the blood pressure will be stabilized, even in the presence of high aldosterone secretion. This is named as aldosterone escape. If I want to explain it briefly, is that because when we have aldosterone in the blood, you can see that mean extracellular volume is increasing. On the other hand, blood pressure is also increasing. What will happen then? This increased blood pressure and volume will force the kidney to increase urine formation independently of the aldosterone. Increase sodium excretion in the urine. This process is named as pressure natriuresis and pressure diuresis. And by this way, you can see that sodium excretion in the urine first is decreased, but then is not only returned to normal, but higher than normal. By this extra sodium excretion that is happening independently of aldosterone, therefore the function of aldosterone will be nullified and the pressure will be stabilized in a higher level. This process is named as aldosterone escape. In the regulation of aldosterone secretion, I told you that one factor was blood volume and blood pressure and renin-angiotensin system. One another factor was the increased potassium concentration in the blood, or hyperkalemia, and also decreased sodium concentration in the blood. All these factors will stimulate the aldosterone secretion. By the way, ACTH, the hormone that was responsible for cortisol, is also needed for aldosterone synthesis, not regulating it, but it is needed for the very first step that we have in the process of aldosterone synthesis, because the conversion of cholesterol into pregnenolone need ACTH. Therefore, we say that ACTH is a permissive enzyme, not regulating enzyme. For the first step, allow the pregnenolone to form and then aldosterone form. If we do not have ACTH, even though that renin-angiotensin is available, aldosterone is not able to be produced because ACTH is not available and the pregnenolone is not formed. Therefore, we say that ACTH has a permissive function, not regulating factor. This shows the renin-angiotensin system. You will read about in the kidney physiology. Therefore, I'm not going to discuss about the detail. I just summarize it, that from the kidney, one hormone is released into the blood named as renin. In the liver, angiotensinogen will be converted into angiotensin 1, and under the function and help of renin, this angiotensin 1 will be converted into angiotensin 2 by the function of one enzyme named as ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme. And this angiotensin converting enzyme produces the active form of angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 will affect the kidney again will affect the adrenal gland to release aldosterone, and now the aldosterone do the function that I told you. By the way, another drug to combat blood pressure is to inhibit ACE enzyme. Drugs such as captopril inhibit ACE. Therefore, angiotensin 2 is not forming. Therefore, we can say that aldosterone will be inhibited, and then blood pressure will be controlled. This figure show how angiotensin 2 stimulate the cells of the adrenal cortex to increase the calcium concentration, and then calcium concentration when increased, it stimulates the process of production of aldosterone and release of aldosterone into the blood. The final hormone, here I am finishing the aldosterone secretion because I told you it will be discussed in the kidney physiology. The final part of adrenal cortex is zona reticularis, and zona reticularis is the area that in the embryonic life, it has a very important role to help the pregnancy, to help the placenta to produce a high concentration of estradiol and progesterone. But then it will be inactivated until the puberty, and at the puberty it will be activated again and start to release androgens, the hormones from the family of testosterone. And the main hormone that is released by the reticularis layer is dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate, and these hormones will be circulating in the blood. In the female, this is the only and the main source for androgens, and produce some effects, some symptoms of the puberty, such as darkening of the genital skin and hairs and axillary hairs, and also producing some acne in the skin. These are the effect of androgen in the female. But in the male, the androgens that are released from adrenal cortex will not have importance when we have higher concentration of androgen that come from the testes. But the process of adrenal activation during the puberty and starting releasing androgens during the puberty is very important in the process of puberty, and I will discuss about it, and is named as adrenarche. This figure shows the process of activation of and activity of zona reticularis. As you can see, during the fetal period, this blue line shows that concentration of dehydroepiandrosterone is increasing very high, and this high concentration, as I told you, help the placenta. At the birth, this will drop, and as you see, this is the point of birth, and this will drop to near zero and remain low until the age of 8 to 9. Have a look at the cortisol. Cortisol also was very high at the time of birth. I told you that near the birth, cortisol, we have a cortisol surge, and cortisol surge will help to maturate the respiratory system and cardiovascular system. But it dropped during the birth, and then immediately will increase to high level even during the peripuberty life. But what about the dehydroepiandrosterone? Dehydroepiandrosterone remain low and will remain low until the puberty, And during the puberty, as you can see, this start to increase, and the process of adrenarche will form. In the male, it will reach very high level, but in the female also will increase, not to the level of the males. And this high concentration of dihydroepiandrosterone, as I told you, provide some puberty functions. During the course of life, we have a decrease and reduction in this enzyme, in this hormone. And as you can see, during the age of in the age of 70, you can see it reached very low levels. And it is believed that one reason that helped the process of aging is this reduction of this enzyme, this hormone. This is another point that you should pay attention. In the zona reticularis, the physiological function of the adrenal androgen, as I told you, mainly refer to some peripheral function for the female, and that I will discuss in the reproductive system. And regulation of the zona reticularis is mainly under the ACTH control. ACTH is responsible for controlling cortisol, but at the same time, it stimulates the zona reticularis, and this androgen that is released by zona reticularis is not able to inhibit the ACTH and CRH. Therefore, it has no negative feedback. I will discuss about these hormones later on the when I'm talking about the reproductive system. By this slide, we reached the end of the adrenal gland and the function of adrenal gland. And you know that when we know the adrenal gland function, we know that there are several diseases, such as Addison disease, that we have deficiency of the adrenal gland hormones, such as mineralocorticoid deficiency, glucocorticoid deficiency. On the other hand, sometimes we have hypersecretion of the hormones, such as Cushing syndrome, Cushing disease, or primary aldosteronism, that we named as Cohn disease. These are the abnormalities that are seen in the adrenal cortex and function and physiology. And you should know here that sometimes we have Cushing disease not because of the hypersecretion of the adrenal gland, because of the drugs that mimic the function of the cortisol. Because I told you that the most powerful drugs that are available to combat inflammation are the cortisone drugs. And sometimes some people have to use cortisone drugs to combat some immune reactions, autoimmune reaction and disease. And in this situation, sometimes we have Cushing disease, not because of the hypersecretion, because of the drugs. Again, the most body of this lecture come from the Guyton and Hall, and some from the Bern and Levy. I invite you to listen to my lecture primarily, and then if you have enough time, I advise you to read these books for further information. I hope that this very brief explanation that I told you about the adrenal cortex and adrenal function and the hormones was useful and beneficial for you, and you understand the hormones and functions and its regulation. Until the next time that we will talk about the next endocrine gland. Have a good time and take care.